So remember how we spent the last 2 or 3 years talking about how 21 Pilots use the color red as a representation of Blurryface because he's the bad guy? Well, we missed something. Or at least I definitely missed something. Okay, let me just try to explain semi-quickly how I got here. It's gonna make me sound like a crazy person. That's fine. Let's go. Okay, back in 2018, I thought this. I'm lighter when I'm lower. I'm higher when I'm heavy. Was a riddle. It sounds like one, right? Anyway, I thought about it for a couple of weeks. Then one day, just popped into my head while I was driving. Saturation. Lighter when it's lower, higher when it's heavy. In this case, literally. You know how low saturation is a lighter color? Well, here, their clothes are lighter, both in color and saturation, because they're not wet. And here, they're heavier in saturation and heavier physically because they're saturated with water. And as a result, color. Now, judging by Josh's hair and the fact that Tyler is wearing blue at all, this can't be later than fall 2013. But as we'll see another time, this notion of saturation, etc. goes back to the way back. So thinking this is a riddle. Being an amateur video editor, the first thing I did was go and re-render all the music videos in higher saturation. And just looking with an eye for color did show some interesting things, but most specifically this. In Tear in My Heart, all these people look kind of distorted and threatening before Jenna knocks the blurry face out of Tyler. And this woman in particular caught my eye, so I upped the saturation, and lo and behold, she is blue. And after Jenna adjusts Tyler's perspective, she isn't. So obvious facial expressions aside, in a really quick insert, this would not be an easy difference to spot. At least for me. I am a simple creature, so I thought, aha, this is an additional source of information and I'll use it to my advantage. But whether an advantage exists remains to be seen. In terms of conveyance though, it doesn't really matter whether blue in particular means anything here. What matters is that it coincides with this mean expression, this feeling that we're supposed to get from this woman that is not good, that is below the threshold of what we're supposed to knowingly absorb. In that way, this change in saturation does contain information. Now, I'm not saying that we're supposed to manipulate the content that's given to us. I think it's supposed to be taken as read, but I think doing so can, in certain circumstances, kind of tune your eye to what's there. Like this. Or maybe just catch another sort of layer. You know what I mean? So, I rave about this for a couple of months, and then years go by, and I bury the evidence in embarrassment. And then Tyler drops this selfie. And I'm like, blue? What's blue? I mean, I know what I think is blue, even though we kind of tend to look at it as gray. So I'm looking around, and I come upon this merch. Now, if you know me, you know I'm a big fan of Brandon Reich. He's a creative director and the merch designer. And you gotta understand, this is weird. As you can see, for previous eras, we pretty much knew what to expect. There's a strict color palette, it's dialed in, and there's this, which on its own is conspicuous because they've never done anything that looks like this in terms of color range. But also, wait a minute, I know those colors. I'll be right there. It's a little bit easier to see if you bump up the saturation, but more than that, I know where it goes next, which is not easy to see like this, but is really easy to see like this. And it turns out that there's also merch that completes that sequence. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm talking about the shift from blue-green to blue. Now, it may be that this is all bullshit, and it probably is, but this is where it led. To my limited understanding, this is Tyler falling under the influence of Dima/the Bishop. This blue is a representation of Dima outside of Dima, so we must see that elsewhere. And we do. From Dima's endlessly encroaching fog to this blue light after Tyler gets captured by the Bishop and Levitate. And I guess we shouldn't leave out it also appears specifically on the word culture, and nowhere else in the video. So he's talking about the culture of Dima, and then when he gets recaptured by the forces of Dima. So that's a pretty strong relationship between Dima-related things and the color blue. And I realize that we probably should have come at this from the other angle, starting with like, hey, doesn't Dima look kind of blue? Where else do we see that? But we could also spend like 30 minutes zooming out on just the light leaks in Heathen's Heavy Dirty Soul and Nico and the Niners, and how they are at moments identical. That's Donahoe's Dima. So I'm saying we could probably not strain ourselves making a case that the blue light in Nico is connected to the blue light in Levitate, and skip right to it's connected to Heathens, it's connected to Heavy Dirty Soul, and more than that. This is super intentional. You have this sort of cold cathedral vibe, this blue filter, blue light, and you don't even have to stop there. You can go as far back as, we'll just stick to topic. So in terms of the question, is saturation a plot point or isn't it? With the following pieces of information, we can go from tenuously bullshit to verifiably not. This is a quote from Shap, one of two lighting designers, from Lighting in Sound America 2019. He's talking about the Bandito tour. He says, color means a lot to our brand. Red means blurry face, yellow equals trench. More specifically, red and white is bad, and yellow and green is good. About a year and a half later, asked for more detail on these colors, Shap would clarify that the red and white struggle starts in the blurry face saga. Dan, the other LD, whose last name I don't want to mispronounce, says, there are hundreds of cues that collectively tell the same story as the music, as if for a moment you could see sound and hear color. Video and lighting complement each other with both timing and color scheme. And when you compare, you see that goes for the music videos too, generally, so you can kind of like triangulate and compare. So they're giving us the moving pieces of conveyance here, the mechanism of storytelling. So how those things work together is gonna tell us what's happening.
Forgot your question entirely, but I just thought of that. No, I do remember your question. A lot of the visuals coming together. Yeah, we spend a lot of time with specifically the live show, whether it's the content on the screens or what the lights are doing, and all the way down to what colors represent what, and having those colors kind of battle each other, and one of them wins. And there's actually a lot of storyline inside of our production of our live show that maybe a lot of people don't catch on to, which is fine because we know that it's there for us.
So with the knowledge that the show is a mirror to the music and the music videos with lights and visuals, I start to look around the show for blue light. And arguably it is there, from this bleak blue beginning to leave the city to its yellow hopeful end. But I haven't gotten into looking really close for that yet because I'm looking for the city, right? Like, I want to see Dima stuff. And frustratingly, what I find is not blue. Every shot that I find of the city is in black and white. Like, every shot. This is the opposite of saturation. This is a total lack of saturation. But, I mean, okay, data is data, so we work from there. Where else do we see this? And I'm sitting here, like an asshole, thinking, where else do I see black or white or gray related to trench? Where is it? Definitely not the album cover I've been looking at for 970 days. Shit. And then there's a lot of small clicking noises all at once. Have you ever heard of frequency bias? It's when you hear about a thing and then you see the thing everywhere. This is like that, except it is everywhere. What I'm saying is, I came into this looking for saturation, specifically blue, and what I found is the opposite. A lot of the opposite. Like years of the opposite. And that's what I'm going to talk about in the next video. You can totally close this now. This was not intended to be so much exposition. Just, man, it blows my mind. I don't know how I read this 2 years ago. Thought, I'll make videos about red and yellow for 2 years. That's what's important. Only red and yellow. Somehow. Do we just not see white and black? In retrospect, it seems really wild that we call these red and yellow and not red, yellow, black, white, and gray. So under different circumstances, I'd probably take a month or two to edit this. I've been sitting on this for a month, and who knows if they're gonna drop the lead single next week. I wasted 8 minutes with lead up to start the idea that black and white and grayscale are very important. So I'm just gonna post this sort of introductory thing, and then hopefully really quickly in the next video we'll get to the cool stuff.